After the presentation, we will have a Q&A session, so think about some questions. And now I'm presenting you Arkadiusz Reikowski, now a freelance artist. The title of the panel is The Creative Process Behind Composing Music for Video Games. Kholat, I pronounce it okay? Kholat?
Yeah, Kholat.
Kholat, Layers of Fear and Husk. Yeah. Enjoy.
It's, yeah, we will concentrate on Kholat and Husk, I think.
So do you hear Arkadiusz?
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I should, I don't know, like this or it doesn't matter. Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm. So thank you very much for coming. So my name is Arkadiusz Reikowski, and I've been doing music for video games for quite a few years now. I think plus minus 10 or so. And one of my most recognizable projects are Kholat and Layers of Fear. And we'll talk about the creative process and the emotions that are behind those projects and in music. I've released 2 solo albums, one of which is quite old now. It's called Inner Silence. And the other one, which is heavily inspired by Silent Hill, it's called Hillside. And just a few days ago, my soundtrack from Kholat was released by the courtesy of Game Music Records on vinyl. Yeah, this is this edition. It's available to buy online. It's not an advert. Yeah, so for those of you who could be interested in that kind of things, I talk a little bit about my setup and about my little cozy studio. So here you can see my composing cave, as I call it, and it's nothing much. There are some wood equalizers on the walls. Right now I use Adam's A7X studio monitors. Here you can see Yamaha MSP5, which are quite old now, but I find them really nice nevertheless. And Native Instruments Complete Control keyboard, which I highly recommend, as it is really nice connected to the software that I use, but I think that most of you use too, the software like Contact and native, all the native instrument stuff that we all use basically as a composers and as some designers too. Audio interface Motu, it's Mark of the Unicorn 828 MK3, and I'm a PC guy. I used to be a Mac guy, but after lack of original ideas from Apple company, I decided to just stick with PC. And I use Cubase 8, which is my main composing software. For sound design, I use Nuendo. As for software, other software, I use a bunch of VSTs from companies like SoundIron, which I happen to be a beta tester, and Native Instruments, 8Dio, and one of the greatest tool ever, which is Spectrasonics. So the first project that I would like to talk about is Kholat. Kholat is an indie survival horror video game developed by Imagination Pro. The player controls a protagonist who is tracing the steps of a group of 9 Russian hikers, which were found missing in Ural Mountains on Kholat in February 1959. So the game is based on this Dyatlov incident. This incident was true, and I think it's a really interesting exploration game, as you can call it, walking simulator. But maybe it's not entirely walking simulator because it has some really nice really nice, things to uncover, and a few chase scenes, and typical horror jump scares. But its atmosphere is really, really nice, and so the instrumentation of this game, we have this really cold atmosphere. The wind is blowing all the time. The game is really dark most of the time, and one of my go-to choices were of course stringed instruments, and in all shape possible. Main theme was composed for string quartet, played beautifully by Iris Quartet, and this string recordings were based to some really nasty and dark-sounding drones and some pretty dark horror soundscapes. These instruments were recorded live and are barely recognizable inside the game. And one of the most important scene to compose for Kholat was the beginning, as I think that the beginning of the game is, in general, one of the most important, aspects of how the player will react to a game, and if he likes to, if he or she would like to play further. So it was really interesting because this is the only scene that takes place in broad daylight, and you basically arrive by the train to this beautiful snowy town, which it is completely empty, and all you can hear is is a wind which is blowing through your ears, and I wanted to create this little hook for the player, which could which could make some interest into the story, and in general, this kind of scenes work really well without music, to be honest. But we thought that we could do something opposite, quite honestly, and it turned out to be really nice for the players, as the reactions were pretty nice. So the song is composed for piano and voice, and it's really sad. It's composed in such a way that it reminds a little bit about this tragedy that happened those years ago, and you, as a player, are trying to uncover the whole truth. So let's hear to the beginning.
No.
Okay, so here was the beginning. It provided some really nice audience and really great feedback from the players from the very beginning. And another scene, Kholat was full of those interesting scenes to compose music for, and one of the better scenes that needed music was the ghost scene. Oh, did I? Oh, okay. And it's a scene where you, as a player, walk through the dark forest, and suddenly there are a few strange orange figures that run away from something. And as you turn around, the character, you realize that they run away from this creepy, weird orange mist, which can obviously kill you. You don't know that, but you know the player always chooses to run away with them, and it was really interesting because it's a typical chase scene in a way, and at first what I did was, I created a track which was a pretty typical horror chase track, So I did some tribal drums. There was a passage with string quartet played, and it didn't really fit so well with the scene. So I thought that maybe we should change the way of thinking a little bit and make it a little bit dreamy, because the whole scene seems to be in kind of a dreamy, weird way, There are some orange figures which are probably ghosts, and the player is, it seems to be a dream in a way. So what we did is I had this recordings of a few instruments that I stretched 20 to 20, I think around 20 times. Every track was stretched, the solo violin and the string quartet, and I also used some great VST, which is Bazantar by 8Dio. It was also stretched and provided really nice background for soundscapes for Kholat. And so it changed completely the view of the scene. So let's see the scene without music and with music, if I can do it. Or maybe with the music. There's some heavily processed male choir. Yeah, so that was a really nice scene to work on, and one of the highlights, the greatest highlights of working on Kholat was that I had the pleasure to work with Mary Elizabeth McGlynn, who she is one of my favorite, singers of all times, I think. Silent Hill is a score that I started to make music because of Silent Hill and a bunch of other soundtracks, but it was really one of my, she's just great. And it was a great opportunity to create this viral fan base for Kholat, working with Mary, because there were a lot of people that never really heard about the game, but they heard about the song that was created for Kholat, and so it was a nice opportunity to have this kind of viral marketing through through the web. So another project, which was pretty interesting, and the reviews were quite positive. It's Layers of Fear by Bluebird Team, and so the story here is the player controls a psychologically disturbed painter who is trying to complete his opus magnum, his masterpiece, his in work of his best work. And we navigate this beautiful Victorian mansion with disturbing secrets about the painter and his family. It's all really creepy and strange. And one of the greatest instrumentation and main theme. So it was a great opportunity to create this quite original main theme, which turned out to be quite popular among players and among the, it has this really nice fan base too. And main theme is a track that was composed more, because as you progress through the game, you realize that it is not only about this mad painter, but it's also about his wife. And she is one of the most important character in the game. And you can even encounter her in some weird and disgusting way. But it was a great opportunity to make this little hint in main theme of this game, to give this little hint that this is not only a story about the painter. And as you go further, you get to know that she is also an artist and a pianist too. You can even hear her playing on the piano. So that's why I've created main theme, which is basically her playing the piano and singing. The voice is sung by Penelope Wilman-Szynalik, here again as in Kholat, the beautiful voice really. So let's hear the main theme. I've noticed that I got these slides a bit misplaced, but yeah, here it is. Yeah, so one of the highlights of the score was that the game itself, or maybe you as you control the protagonist, it slowly descends into madness. So it was really nice for me too, because I could make some interesting choices of the music as the player would go further. And the music at the very beginning is really quite natural, and it has this natural sound of the piano, you know, and the real instruments. And then as you slowly progress through the game, everything falls apart, and you can hear the same themes that played at the very beginning, which are then heavily processed and stretched and destroyed to create this weird atmosphere of horror, basically. So, yeah. And as for the instrumentation, besides piano, I heavily used Omnisphere in this one, as it's a go-to machine for making some pretty dark and twisted soundscapes, especially for well, maybe not especially for horrors, but it was a great tool to use here. So we can hear a bit of some other tracks from the soundtrack. This was one. I've got some problems with sound here, I think. So as you can see, the game provided really nice audio, really nice visuals, basically, because when I see the early concepts from the game, you know, it strikes you from the very beginning that we should use some traces of classical music in the soundtrack. There are a lot of old, beautiful furnitures. We've got these antiques, you know, this beautiful paintings on the walls. So there is some artism in game which should be somehow available in the music. And this is one of the twisted ones. The crying was actually used as a 3D audio listener in-game, so the player could search for the crying, and you know, there was some nice little surprise waiting in the dark. So it was Layers of Fear. And so one final word for this presentation. I think that both game developer studios really, and composers, shouldn't underestimate the power of music and the emotion it carries, because video game music literally gives us, you know, infinite possibilities of how to control the player's emotions. So it's a really pretty fucking powerful tool. And I think that modern game music feels a little bit too inspired by Hollywood standards. And I mean, themes like Monkey Island, for example, tune, or Final Fantasy, or even Silent Hill are one of the best ever, and we should embrace the originality and possibilities video game gives us as a medium. And to say the least, the adaptiveness of music and the interactivity and VR, which should give us pretty crazy methods to work with. So thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you very much. Do you have some questions? Okay.
Hello, thank you for this presentation.
Don't kill me.
Are you also a sound designer?
Yeah, sometimes.
When you show there only music, you show here there was only music, no sound design in the scenes with the running ghost. That's how it is in the game? Is it also sound design there, or is music is only sound in that scene?
No, of course not. It was recorded from YouTube, so I had to throw away the sound design because there was some really weird commentary going on in the background.
Okay, and I like to ask, what is when there is ambient like wind or something like that, the noises of nature, and there is music there also, what is your balance between the ambience and the music in the scene?
Well, it's a really broad topic, to be honest, balancing the whole game. But one of the most important things to me is working closely with sound designers, because every sound has its own tonality, as the music have, basically. So it really we should really work close with sound designers to make this perfect balance, and to don't make a situation when the music really stands out, as you could hear in Prey, for example, if you've played it lately. Yeah, so there are some great audio balance errors, I think, worth to check out. Yeah, but as for balancing itself, it's it all depends on what you want to achieve, to be honest, because soundscapes like wind sometimes just mimic wind, and you don't really want to make, for example, the wind a lot more quieter, because they should really coexist at the same level. But it all depends on what you want to achieve in a scene.
And I got one more question. Do you do also adaptive music? And if you do, how you do it? How is the pipeline of this?
Yeah, adaptive music. Yeah, it's I do adaptive music. I work lately very closely with Wise or Wise. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Yeah, Wise. And FMOD. I work on a bunch of games that use adaptive music, like 7, which is done with Marcin Przybyłowicz. And how do I do it? It's the approach is really different, because you have to control the layers of the music. So basically, every layer of your track should work nicely in separate ways. So
and all of them together also have
and
to
all
work.
of them together should really play along nicely,
So you only use layering, yes?
Yeah, this is only layering and transitions and stingers, and some stingers for the beginning and fade outs. It's a pretty complicated process.
Yes, I know. Thank you very much.
I have 2 questions, but first one is, how closely do you work with the game designers and directors? Like, is it very close cooperation, or do they give you free hands? And also, how many times do they inspire you by giving you ideas, concepts, etc.?
Well, I work with game designers pretty closely, but with Imagination Pro and Bloober Team, I had this was a great honor for me to work with them, because they pretty much gave me a free hand on almost everything. right now I work on pretty interesting project, which is a cyberpunk storytelling game called Observer, and I think that this work is. I work pretty much. I've never worked so close with art directors and game designers as much as this one, because there are some scenes, especially when you make interactive music, which really need to, they need to react accordingly to the player. So this kind of close cooperation is really needed.
Okay, so my second question is about finding the right sound for the music, because you, sorry, for Layers of Fear there's a lot of chamber music, and for Observer there is very intense electronic sound. And how do you find, how do you find the right sound for the music?
Well, for me it's like working with colors, to be honest. Pretty much I think that the color of a scene or the color of a game, the colors of a game affect me mostly of what music do I choose for a game. But it's a really interesting question. You know, at some level, I really like to experiment most. You know, so just on one monitor I have this game running in the background. You know. And I just play on the piano and hear what fits most.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks.
Hello, thanks for the talk. I have a question. What are the minimal requirements for you to start composing in case of game production, game music production? Is it like screenshots or some short gameplays or general description of the game?
I think it's a matter of personal, requirements. But to be honest, I like to work on a game which is done in, I don't know, maybe 30 or 40%. I just like to have some scenes recorded, some movies, you know, and something that I can play in the background. Working with concepts has this, you are not always sure that what you do is the right way, you know, because the gameplay can change the situation almost entirely sometimes. So I like to have something more.
Thank you.
Hello, I have a question. How long takes you to finish the main part of your production, like the melodies and let's say some sketch of what you would like to do in the whole game?
It of course depends on the length of the project, because Layers of Fear was produced really fast, and the music and all sound design, because I did some sound design there too, was created I think in 2 months. Kholat was a little bit longer. Working on Observer is a pain in the ass, because it literally, you know, I need to work, as I've said before, really closely with game designers, because every aspect of the game is interactive and everything reacts to your movements. So pretty much we work to the very end of the production, you know. So it all depends if you have this flexibility to compose the music earlier, and you know, just give the tracks to the developers, and you know, do what they want to do what you want to do, basically. Yeah. So. But I work. I try to make 2 tracks daily.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Anyone? More questions? Are you sure? Okay.
So my second question follows the previous one. What is the proper length for the soundtrack for the game?
This one is hard one because I'm not really sure. I think that Kholat could use a little bit more music. Its soundtrack was, I think, half an hour or something. It was a little bit too. It could use a little bit longer soundtrack. I think that an hour is for 4 to 5 hours game. So an hour of soundtrack is it's a pretty good number to fit the game with music and work with silence too, because silence is one of the most important part of the soundtrack too. So yeah, it all depends.
4 hours for Flappy Bird.
Yeah, infinite hours for Flappy Birds and 5 minutes of soundtrack.
That what you said about the length of the music for game. That reminds me one more question. How many silence and how many music there is in the game?
Well, I like to work with and experiment with silence, to be honest. So I really dislike the situations where the music is playing all the time. There are some exceptions, like for example, Persona game, if you played it for PS4. The music plays all the time and it is really fantastic. But most of times, like in horror games, sound design is equally important to the music. So it should be balanced properly. I'm not sure if I can tell you right now how to do it, because it's a matter of personal. It's a matter of this particular project that you work on.
So you can say like numbers like 50-50, 50% music, 50%.
No, it's really hard to say, to be honest. Yeah.
Of course. Thank you.
I have another one. Have you ever worked with totally musical game projects, which were based on reacting on music?
No, to be honest, no. I never did. But I know that.
I just wondered, have you some experience?
Right now, recently I've worked on some really interesting projects. It's called Father and Son. It's made by ex-Sony and ex-UB employees. It was made for Italian Naples Museum. It's really musical in a way, but and it's composed also for quartet and a soprano. But it doesn't have this kind of cooperation that reacts to the player's emotions. But I know that it could be pretty interesting and challenging work.
Yeah, especially for deaf people.
Yeah, well, especially for deaf people. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Any more questions? We have some very curious audience.
So that would be the last one from me.
Okay.
I think. So in case of the chase scene that you showed us, how did you know what was the time that player would run? So because you wanted to create some tension, in this track, and how would you know that the chase was ended or something like that?
Yeah. What you can't see here is that this track fades away at some point and crossfades to another track, because you basically run away from this orange weird mist and you arrive to this weird big looking tree. And the music just basically crossfades. But this is one of the disadvantages of working on a project where you can't make the music interactive, because Kholat was a project where the music was pretty much It was, we just put tracks inside the game and they just played. So there wasn't a lot of freehand of how to develop the length of tracks. So it was just made by ear. So I really, all I needed to do is play the scene several times and make music. Yeah.
Thank you.
I've got a little bit more personal question. How did you end up making so many games, music for games? Was it a decision made by yourself, or it was just, you know, the best financial option? You know.
I've always wanted to do movies, to be honest. But maybe not movies. I always wanted to do music for anime. Because I started making music where I've seen this Ghost in the Shell, which is pretty nice. And one of my favorite movies of all time, I think. And I've heard this pretty awesome Japanese traditional choir, and I fell in love with what you can do with the music for something on the screen, and you can use something, you can do something so truly unique, and so that was the start of my thinking about becoming a composer, but. It was everything my decision from the very beginning.
What have you studied? Have you studied it, or you're self-taught? What's your background? You know.
No, I'm a self-taught, but a couple of years ago I did some online studies, which is called Think Space Education, which are really nice. They've got some pretty great courses called. Cinematic orchestration and things like that. You can even get a degree by studying online and just going for the exam abroad. It's really nice. But I started with nothing, just with what I could learn from games and from movies. And when I started, it was really, there wasn't a lot of ways to learn from, to be honest, because we hadn't this. Everything that I could do was go to some Academy of Music, which doesn't really gave us education about music in games, because games weren't so popular back in the days. So I did it myself. I played in a couple of bands, rock bands. I learned how to play a guitar because I'm a guitarist, and that's pretty much everything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have some more questions? Okay, maybe the last one.
Hi, Eric.
Hi.
Sorry for the late, first of all. I see by description that I have missed something. But I hope you...
pretty much.
Yeah, but I hope we can talk about this later. But my question is about, because you are known from the Sondiron and VST libraries demo, and my question is, do you prefer to work on virtual instruments or for live musicians?
There's this rule for making music, which is pretty accurate, I think, and it is that you always should include something real in your recordings, something real in your synthetic track. Even if it is only a voice or some kind of a piano or even some analog synth, it adds this flavor to your track, which transcends this on a whole different level. But I like to work with live musicians, but there's this budget problem, which happens all the time, and it's not possible all the time. But I like to pretty much record in my every soundtrack something which is live and some human.
Do you have home studio already?
No, I always record in some other studios. But I have the possibility of recording. I've recorded. Well, we've recorded Penelopa in the studio of Artifex Mundi when I happened to work in. And I've got some mics in my home studio too, so I could record a solo instrument maybe, but nothing much. It's nothing much.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, we need to end the panel. I recommend you to approach Arkadiusz during the lunch break and ask him more questions. It's okay for you. Thank you very much
Thank you.
for the great presentation. Thanks.
Thank you very much.